We have a quorum, and I also know that Ms. Smith is planning to join us. She's going to be a few minutes late, but we currently have a quorum and can get started. Let me start with one announcement before we get to the rest of our agenda, and that is thanks once again to the cafeteria and food service in the hospital. We have been provided lunch, and in the ongoing dispelling of the myths of hospital food, there is a delicious sandwich station here. I would invite all of the committee members and all people present and guests to enjoy this fantastic spread that we have. And I will, again, give our very sincere thanks to the hospital food service for providing us lunch during today's meeting. We'll start with conflict of interest. If any of the committee members have a conflict of interest that they need to disclose, would they please do so now? Okay, hearing none, we'll move to our mission and vision statement. I'd ask Dr. Miller if you please would read the hospital's mission and vision statements.
To improve the health and wellness of Nashville by providing equitable access to coordinated patient-centered care, supporting tomorrow's caregivers, and translating science into clinical practice. Our vision is a leader in exceptional community health care, one neighbor at a time.
Thank you, Dr. Miller. This is a public meeting, and so at each meeting we give the public an opportunity, if they wish, to make comments to the committee. Ms. Lester, do we have any public comments?
No, sir, there are none.
Okay, so let's move on to our first action item, which is the minutes from our previous committee meeting held April 11th. You've received copies of the minutes as part of the materials in advance of our meeting. Hope you've had a chance to review those. Are there any revisions or edits or corrections that need to be made before we vote on them?
Move to approve.
There's a motion. There's a second. Thank you, Dr. Nettles. Any discussion? If not, motion's been made and properly seconded. All those in favor of approving the previous meeting minutes say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries and the minutes are approved. Okay, new business. First item on our agenda is the interim CEO contract for Dr. Nettles. And actually, Dr. Martin is here, our board chair, and I will defer to him or ask him. We at our previous board meeting, we approved having Dr. Nettles, appointing her, serving in the interim CEO role. I'm sorry? Dr. Elders. What did I say? Nettles. No, you're not the interim CEO. No. Okay. All right, thank you. I was looking at Dr. Nettles and thinking about Dr. Elders.
Well, okay. I had food in my mouth.
Well, that's why this is first on the agenda, because there was a surprise where we were actually substituting you.
And I was paying attention to the meeting.
Good. So. I'm glad you all were paying attention. I'm sorry about that. No, Dr. Elders has been appointed the interim CEO, and Dr. Martin, we have this on our agenda. Is there a particular recommendation or point that you wanted this committee to consider in that respect?
The history is that I was provided by our HR department a draft of a contract, and Derek and I have discussed, and we came to the conclusion that last week all we needed to do was the resolution appointing Dr. Elders, so she could go ahead and get paid retroactive to April the 17th. Derek also has a copy of that. I'm not sure exactly where this came from. Maybe you can or somebody can say where it came from. But there are some things in it that that are not necessary. Go ahead.
The draft was a merger of a couple of different contracts and information from different contracts of previous CEOs. And so it has standard language in there for the hospital, and then it was a combination of a couple of
Okay,
different
and
CEOs.
you put it together, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. So in the negotiation of the salary, Dr. Elders agreed to remove some of the things in here, including 90-day notice, including the section on bonus and section on severance benefits. So Derek, I don't know if you've done any work on this or.
I've reviewed about 3/4 of it, but I've still, the legal department's opinion was that the resolution is sufficient. I did, though, have a proposal to suggest, if you want to discuss this option, after haven't had a chance to speak with Diana about this, but to the extent you would like this would ultimately be dependent on the board. I know there was some language about perhaps some additional vacation leave or something. The board could award her with some admin leave with pay that could be during her tenure as interim or carry forward for a period of time of 1 year after that, to the extent, there's going to be more time for her to enjoy some leave at some point, perhaps. And so that would be a recommendation that I could further discuss. I'm not quite aware of where she stands in her tenure with the hospital and to how much under your rules she can sort of keep a vacation leave in the bank. There's some caps on that at some point, I believe. And so Diana could perhaps help in that calculation, which is why there could be some additional leave awarded. There's mechanisms to get there available to you all. But that would not necessarily have to be reflected in a contract. Again, that could be another resolution to award that.
Just to make sure I understand, did you say that the resolution should suffice and we don't actually need a contract?
It does not, but that extra leave issue was one thing that contract was addressing that we didn't get to in the resolution.
So
if you choose to do more, there are options.
Do we have to have a contract?
No, it's not necessary.
Okay.
I think you're as protected as a board as you can be with the resolution.
I think the resolution outlines her duties as interim CEO and that she will continue as chief nursing officer. It addresses the salary issues. She has verbally agreed not to pursue the other things the monetary things that I talked about. I'm happy with not having a contract if our legal department.
And she not only verbally agreed, she has signed the resolution as well as you.
Exactly.
So, she's accepted those terms.
So if I'm hearing it correctly, there's sort of ongoing negotiations about some of the details of, extent of administrative leave and other things that would be appropriate for an interim CEO role that's subject to ongoing discussion. I guess, are we optimistic that Dr. Elders and the board chair, like those who are discussing, are going to reach some resolution? It doesn't seem like that.
Well, there actually are no negotiations going on. Diana submitted this, but I'm not aware that asked for these things.
I see.
I just noted some of them. We could have had a lower salary and had some of these other things in there. But once we arrived at the salary we arrived at, which, by the way, was a 50th percentile of a national standard for interim CEO of a safety net hospital, she was happy with that and did not feel any of the rest of the things were necessary. So even though there is something in here about vacation days is not something that she's asked me or, as far as I'm aware, anybody else about. We can certainly ask her about that, but there are no negotiations going on currently.
So the current standard for the previous CEO was 30 days. She's right now at 25 because of her tenure and her position as an executive. So the additional 5 was just to maintain consistency with what the previous CEO. So everything that you saw in that contract was elements that a previous CEO would have had.
Right.
So I did not, all I did was take elements from the contracts, some of the previous contracts,
Yeah.
and put them together to send as a draft for consideration.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that the committee members knew that these were not things that Dr. Elders specifically asked for in this contract. And as far as vacation days and the suggestion of bonus and all that, it's complicated because it's unlikely that she will serve in this role for an entire fiscal year. Very unlikely. So I think it'd be appropriate that she have the same number of vacation or administrative days as a CEO would have, and we could make a decision about that.
Just one thing I'd like to just state from my personal opinion is I don't want to, and I have no problem, obviously I've been a huge supporter of Dr. Elders, so this is outside of my personal support for Dr. Elders. But I want to be very careful that we continue to set a precedent by which other people have made choices about benefits, compensation, et cetera, in a CEO role. I want to make sure that we are more thoughtful about, as we negotiate all of this going forward for a new CEO, that all of these things are not built in, whether it's car allowances, parking allowances, all these things that the prior CEO had. I want to make sure that us as a board is more thoughtful about what that looks like. Is it appropriate? Is it the right amount? So I think this is an opportunity, like we talked about, to hit reset. And whether it's vacation days or increases or retirement contributions, all I think need to be looked at. So that's the only thing I'd like to say with regard to specifically this interim CEO position. Again, not Dr. Elders, but the interim, and just giving away all these other benefits that one person is, one, not asked for, or two, if we're trying to hit reset going forward. So I think that would be my preference, is to not add on a bunch of things that someone, one, hasn't asked for, and two, we may be resetting anyways. So that would just be my personal opinion.
If I'm hearing, I appreciate that. And Ms. Smith, thank you for being here. Dr. Nzaruri, thank you for being here. I know this is not very convenient for your schedule, but I appreciate your coming. It's nice to have the whole committee gathered. But Ms. Smith, yes, I think if I'm hearing the discussion, I think it is that there was most of what were components of the prior CEO's package, including performance bonus and other sort of perks, certainly in like a generous annuity that was somehow in addition to retirement. Things that the board has expressed some concern about in previous meetings are not part of this interim CEO because they're not appropriate to an interim CEO role. You know, someone who's not going to be here for a full fiscal year really doesn't have a stake in performance bonus based on long-term performance. So I think appropriately those are gone, and absolutely I believe that you're right. My sense is the same, is that this board, in making our new CEO selection, is going to the compensation for that person is likely to be structured differently than the prior CEO's compensation. And so we certainly don't want to build that in right now. And I don't think that we are, if I'm hearing correctly, what the state of things are.
So I as an ex officio, can't make a motion here, but I would suggest that we go with Derek's suggestion that a contract is unnecessary and not do one.
Well, as I'm hearing it, there may be, I don't know that there's an action item. The board has passed a resolution that provides for Dr. Elder's role as interim CEO and has set a general parameters for compensation that the board has resolved and that she has signed. And at this point, that is the deal. And I mean, if we couldn't move to endorse the possibility that we don't need any further written agreement, I also would be in favor of if Dr. Elders and Metro Legal determine we do want to memorialize something, that would certainly have to come before the board for approval, and this committee could see it first. So, but I'm not sure what our action item is, other than to endorse what the status quo is right now.
I believe under the rules, if there's not a motion brought forward, it doesn't become an action item, so there wouldn't be the need for even a further discussion or a vote. Status quo will remain based on the resolution just by inaction.
Yes. And anything this committee would do would have to be in the form of a recommendation for ultimate board action. So, Dr. Martin, if you want the board to eventually, or at its next meeting, further resolve that there absolutely be no written agreement, we could entertain that. I tend to think that we've sort of let things lie the way they are now.
I'm happy with that. I mean, I think that we stated at the board meeting that the next step would be a contract, but I'm happy just to announce the next board meeting that we had examined it and she had agreed basically that the resolution was sufficient and that we had a discussion and felt it was not necessary.
Great. Well, we operate with some formalities, but I will briefly just look around the room and see if people are okay with that. All right. So we're not going to take any formal action, but thank you for the discussion. That's good for this committee to know the status of that, and especially good for us to have solidified Dr. Elders in the role that she has right now. The second item on our agenda is Metro Council resolution, and this also does not require action, but wanted to make it known to the members of this committee. A couple of weeks ago, the Metro Council passed a resolution directed to our committee and to the board suggesting the type of process that the members of the council would like us to engage in as part of this CEO search process. You have a copy of the Metro Council resolution. I mean, it speaks for itself, but my take from it is that the Metro Council is wanting us to be very intentional about getting input from Metro General medical staff, employees, and the community in which our hospital is situated, and that needs to be an important part of how we go about our search. I personally am very supportive of that. I think from what I've heard from our committee meetings so far, this committee is, but just to want to make the committee aware of that the Metro Council has provided us this guidance and think about that as we go through this process. There is also one action item that they have asked, which is that a copy of that resolution be provided to candidates for the position, which when we get to that point of having a set of candidates, we certainly will do. Again, nothing for us to act on, but for us to be aware of and things that Metro Council has asked of us as we go about our work. Any comments or things?
I'm curious if anybody familiar with the council can answer perhaps whether there's any meaning to, if you look at the dates and the action that it was returned unsigned by the mayor. I don't know if the mayor signs all resolutions and that's routine. Can anybody read anything into that?
I don't know about that specifically. I did reach out to some council members that I know and specifically ask about this. I asked if they understood if it was in response to the board's action to not continue the contract. Did they feel like they needed to provide guidance, guardrails, et cetera? or if it's something that is just routine in nature. My understanding is that from that council person, that this type of resolution has been also passed for another prior head. So I just wanted to have some clarity around, was it an issue that council saw with either our board or any decision-making we had, where they felt like they needed to articulate their own direction? And I didn't get the sense that that was the case, but it did raise some concern for me personally, that someone would need to come out and specifically state what we needed to do, which was already actually in motion. Quite frankly, if people come to the meeting or hear our conversation, all of this is what we've been talking about. But I wanted to make sure that I understood as a committee member and board member what the intent was. And I think that was where I was really wanting to get some more clarity. So I don't know about the signature piece of it. That is an interesting comment, but I did want to let you know that I did have a conversation about that. Thank you.
I'm glad you got that. I also do. That's a real Metro inside baseball question. Maybe somebody in the room knows the significance or insignificance of the mayor's returning without signature. I can't comment one way or the other. I do think it's important that whether the mayor signed it or not, that it was passed the council by resolution. I frankly, this is just my interpretation of it. I was pleased to see the Metro Council. I suspect that they had recently appropriated an additional $10 million for the hospital's operation, and I suspect that the Metro Council is now paying attention to see where Metro dollars are going. And frankly, I welcome it. I think that the more stakeholders and people in the community, including people in Metro government and Metro Council that are paying attention to what's happening, that have a stake in the hospital, the better. So I absolutely welcome and appreciate their suggestions and their guidance, and appreciate their infusion of capital at a critical time.
Absolutely, and I would echo those comments. I just wanted to make sure that the people on council understood the work that was being done here. And when we came to them, this was part of the steps for the turnaround, and that we were putting in the work as a board to move things forward, and all of these things had been discussed. So I think that was, kind of where my heart was and with all this I am very thankful for the funds. I'm very thankful for the engagement, but I want to make sure that they realize that the hard work is being done here too. Thank you.
Can we be impeached by the Metro Council? Yeah. I don't know. I think we can. Okay, so I appreciate the hard work, and then if they don't like what we're doing, they can tell us not to do it anymore. We get a lot of time. I guess so. All right, well, that's kind of a sad way to go. We're actually in a much,
Let me just
much better
mention
place.
as an aside, I'm always reaching out to the mayor's office with different items and issues and so forth. And my new contact is Mr. Menendez. He's sort of been assigned, I guess. I think his title is Chief Development Officer or something like that.
Yeah.
I haven't met with him yet, but this will be one of the questions that I ask him about, and he's very knowledgeable about.
Yeah, he could give you the inside baseball about the mayor's signature, I think. Yeah, well, that's good. I mean, I think the more contacts we have, the better. That's all encouraging. Okay, so final item on our new business is the CEO search firm selection. I will give sort of a recap of where things stand and then invite discussion. I do think we have sort of a decision point here as to what we're going to do going forward in terms of hiring a third party to help us in many ways to run this search, do the significant amount of legwork that's required for something like this. At our last meeting, we met with representatives from B.E. Smith, which is a company that was acquired by a larger company, AMN, that is in the business of conducting executive searches in the healthcare industry. Since our last meeting, they presented us a cost proposal, and based on some questions that I received through Metro Legal and through Ms. Lester from committee members. I went to them and had a discussion and essentially asked them for a best and final cost proposal as we came to this meeting. And so you received this morning, or you have with you in your packets, their revised cost proposal, which makes a significant reduction in the cost that they had originally proposed to us. So that is before us for information. I will say now, from a procurement standpoint, we can have discussion about this out of respect for them and the fact that this may at some point become a competitively bid contract, that we refrain in a public meeting from talking about the specific costs that is being proposed. I don't think it's fair to a proposer, if they are about to go into a competitive procurement, to have their best and final offer publicly known. And so given where things stand, we of course are going to debate and discuss publicly what our decision is going to be. I don't think it's required for us to reveal the exact price, and it wouldn't be appropriate given that a decision we might make is to have this publicly bid. So that's where that stands. So I invite discussion. What our agenda item is. All right. I invite discussion and also recognize that there is some homework to be done about the procurement that led to using B.E. Smith over the last 10 years to serve this function. And so I will advise the committee that that is something that still needs to be run down as to what was the process that we used and our ability to contract with them. We are hopeful that if we choose to use them, that we can rely on them as having already been part of a procurement or an agency that is available to us through other relationships. But just to advise, that is a hoop that we need to go through. We can't answer that question now. I invite our counsel, Mr. Smith, to comment more on that if there is during the course of the meeting some questions or something or additional commentary. But I think that's the gist of it. So the issue on the agenda is, in light of our meeting with AMN, their most recent cost proposal, what do we think about retaining them, or our options are to go out and see what else is available in the marketplace. That's where we are. Dr. Miller.
I'm not sure what this would look like to go back and look at how this firm was retained to begin with. What would that look like?
Well, so my understanding at the beginning of this process is that the hospital conducted a public procurement that would be required if you are going to, if you are a public entity and you are looking for these types of services. There may be some legal questions to the type of procurement, but I think it was generally understood that we need to go through a competitive process. I thought that process had been done in 2014, and that as a result, B.E. Smith was selected and was therefore available to us to use anytime when we didn't need to individually procure. There's now some question as to what that process was, and we're sort of doing a historical analysis to figure out what was the process, and are we confident that it is the kind of process that would allow us to do that, to just take them off the shelf and use them if we chose to do that.
So doing that would pretty much by doing that would preclude us considering them with a resolution or vote today.
I would say we could resolve, again, subject to council's clearing this. We could resolve, if it were the will of the committee to engage AMN for this search, that we could do that conditioned on Metro Legal confirming that is a viable legal path, and we could make that decision. We could run that down. Now we may come back in 2 weeks and say we got to do something else. But if it's the will of the committee to engage them, then it would become the task of hospital procurement and Metro Legal to assure that we are on solid footing with the procurement and to negotiate the final agreement. I say final agreement, it would be like a statement of work is how I would think of it. When you have an agreement like this with a vendor, you have a master agreement that says we're going to use you for these purposes, and then as you do individual tasks like this one, you have something that I would call a statement of work, but it's, sort of a subsidiary agreement.
What I remember from 2014 was that B.E. Smith they gave the lowest bid in the process. Prior to that, there was a consultancy firm that was retained to try to tighten things at the hospital, reduce inefficiencies, and they were also part of the decision, but they felt like B.E. Smith had a lot of credibility for CEO search, and by them being low, that it was okay to use them. That's what I remember.
That's encouraging because that's what I had heard is that there was some bids received, there was some consideration of competitors, and that B.E. Smith was selected.
Yes.
What we're doing now is confirming exactly what that process looked like. We want, of course, to be attentive to the requirements of contracting for a government body. So, but I'm glad to hear you say that because it reaffirms what we have heard, which is a process like that was conducted.
May I ask, is the question to be certain that this contract was bid out 10 years ago, or is it knowing it was bid out, can we still use it today? Which is the question?
I think it's both or a combination of both. It is unusual to have a contract like this in place for 10 years. There are extensions of contracts, but generally speaking, yes. So one of the questions is, are we still timely to be using their services?
And my understanding is that we have continued to use them as recently as when, Diane? 2020. Okay.
And then we have some, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I thought there was more recent. I got a printout of all of the invoices that they've been paid, and they were as recently as the last couple of years.
So in 2020, we did the chief marketing officer position, and then we've done a few director positions at the higher level. But for the chief roles, 2020 was the last one. So we have had a consecutive use of their services since that initial master agreement was created. So there's not been a lapse in that. We've used them regularly for that type of search. But yes, ma'am.
So 2 quick questions. One, how many in total employees have we hired from their services is the first question.
I think there was at least we have an email with that information. I'm going to say, if I added up my head, there might have been 12.
Okay, and what would we consider the success of the 12 people that were hired? And I know that's a broad term, but
From a longevity standpoint.
are they still here? Are they, they stay a while?
Some of them are still here. Obviously, Dr. Webb was one of those folks, and he is now no longer here. Bruce was one of those folks, and he had 7 years. The chief marketing officer lasted about 3, but she's gone on to other things within the city. I believe she's at the Symphony right now. So it just depends. I still have a few directors that are there from that search. The difference between them and probably others is the year guarantee. We did use it 1 year. They hired someone. They did not last. They decided that we were not the place for them. And then they had to redo the process for another person. And then we hired Bruce. So there's been consistency, and that's probably why. And then obviously the guarantee, because there was no cost if it didn't work out. That's a very long time for, I don't know if you know service contracts, when we do any kind of temporary or search firms, Usually they give you maybe 60, maybe 90 days, and then after that, they wash their hands of, they're just like, okay, you've chosen this. But a year-long guarantee is unusual in the market, and so that just speaks to that. Now, this is only my experience with this firm, and so I can only speak to my experience with the firm so far.
Thank you. So I guess the question I would have is, and I haven't read the contract, but if the contract specifically states that the job is for a specific position and not for ongoing consultative services, so each position in each contract really has a start date and end date, that would concern me that, especially for this specific position being as big as it is, and now widely watched, obviously, that should we take the time and diligence and look at some other quotes? I guess that would be the question I would have to the committee. And then two, I do think that the contract, 2014 to now, that's a long time to not RFP a process. And let me also state, since unfortunately I was not at the last meeting, but did watch you all on video. An hour and 45 minutes, by the way. But it was, I have a lot of confidence in the current team. So I don't feel, as a board member, the need to rush down the aisle on this, I guess. I want to do it right. I know there's a lot of eyes on this. And it's not that I didn't like AMN, but I guess the question I would pose back to the committee in general, and love to hear a discussion around, is it feels like we're rushing down the aisle. Like we're trying to find somebody, so we try to hire somebody, so it doesn't go past 6 months, so it doesn't go past 7 months. And the answer is like, why? Are we uncomfortable with the current situation? Do we feel like we're being held back in any way by moving forward? I don't know that I see that, but I guess that would be, I think, a fair point to discuss, to be able to understand, in addition to the legalities of the RFP process, but just kind of a timeline. Is that fair?
Absolutely. That is the exact discussion that we're going to have. Yeah, I like that. Thank you for teeing that up.
Well, I think that, I appreciate that, because that's an excellent segue to what I was going to, for my thoughts. One, from the last board meeting, I think we were able to get some understanding and some level of comfort that we don't have to rush, because I think we're in a very good place. So I think that was alleviated. Did I miss it? I think that's kind of, it's okay that we take our time. Now, my concern is that are there other search firms that do healthcare? And it really is, we should do our due diligence, I think, in terms of just finding that out, and what their success rate is, and that kind of thing. But it is a process that I think we need to be very careful about, because not only are we dealing with the here and now and the infrastructure of the here and now, we're also dealing with what we want to do and see for the future. And that involves another level of skills and vision and expertise and so forth that who's ever chosen may not be at that level yet, or we want them to be at that level to continue on, so we don't have to do another search. So I want to make sure that we're using this time to adequately cover all of our bases in order to get to what we think is going to be most viable for this hospital and those who work here and want to feel good in coming here and doing their work here, and then get the highest quality of care possible. And so that will certainly entail more than 6 months. It just has to. I don't see how that could even work. So to sum up, I feel very comfortable in thinking about who else would have these, what other firms would have this capability, and we might circle back to where we are, but I don't see any need to rush.
Well, I agree with what has been said. I'm also very comfortable with the leadership that we have right now. Just to look at the other side of it, should we determine that we're justified in using AMN without bidding it out. We have, I think the city, the council, the mayor in this process are very interested in our making some changes that will help our budget, and some of those will be likely personnel changes as indicated in the plan Dr. Elders has submitted, and there's the tension of should a new CEO have some input into how that team is going to be, and if we're pushing the process from 6 months, which is what AMN predicted, to 9 months or more, having to go through RFP, then that means that the interim will either have to live with what we have, or the interim will have to make those decisions with the input and support of the board. So there is some argument for moving ahead with some degree of speed. One other thing, which may not matter at all, is there are some candidates who have made themselves known, who are ready, to be interviewed and are interested in the job. Some of whom are have local history or different or similar experiences and everything. So, and I'm pretty happy with AMN. We've had them recommended by two respected outside healthcare organizations. And certainly if we're not justified and Mr. Smith and the Metro Department feels that we need to do an RFP, then we need to do that. But if we don't, I for one would be comfortable with proceeding with AMN, assuming without discussion of the terms, Mr. Esquivel feels like we've gotten reasonable concessions from them. So that's just sort of the other side of this argument, or discussion, not argument.
Well, I agree, but I just want to make sure that it's clear that we've given some thought to maybe even considering if there are other possibilities out there, since there's been a period of time. That's all I'm saying. And also I want expertise in this process, the best to do this process. So either way, just as long as we kind of know that information, I'm comfortable.
I would absolutely agree with the idea that our diligence is important, and that we ought not to rush for the sake of rushing. There are a couple of points where I think that I understand to be some expediency, if there is, and this doesn't have to carry the day. One, I heard two board members at our last meeting be pretty firm in saying they thought 6 months for a CEO search was wildly too long, which surprised me, and I think just as not sure that's even possible. But there are a couple of people, at least on the board, who think, and if we go through an RFP process, it is for sure at least 9 months. It's going to take 4 months to do an RFP process, at least. But that would be, we could do it, but it would be that. So there is at least some sentiment on the board to go. The other thing that occurs to me is that Dr. Elders, I think, had a full-time job as the chief nursing officer. Now she's working as the interim CEO, which is also a full-time job. So we have a person, I have utmost confidence in her and the team, but I'm also aware that we're asking a person to do 2 full-time jobs at the same time. And that's not an ideal situation for anybody. And on an interim basis, that's can be done and great. But a year of doing 2 jobs that are the chief nursing officer and the chief executive officer, to me at least, thinks that is at some point becomes asking too much of one person.
In addition to the concern about asking one person to do too much, I worry the tension between trying to take as long as possible to do this and the fact that as someone who practices in the hospital, there are critical, urgent decisions that need to be made that shouldn't be allowed to wait for a year, that only a full-time CEO would have the power to make. So that would be lost if we do a 9 or 12-month RFP. But it's possible if we want to, in the spirit of transparency, compare someone to AMN, that's probably, but that urgency has to be there, that there are critical decisions. Dr. Webb wrecked this hospital. It needs a great CEO to step in to do a lot of repair, and he can't wait for a year or more longer, in my opinion, as someone who practices here every day.
What would be the standard for saying, what documentation, what history would we need to say, we don't need to do an RFP? I'm not sure what that would look like.
The history would be that we have had a 10-year relationship with a vendor that, as you know,
Which we know.
which knows us, which has hired for us in the past, which works with our, team on a day-to-day basis, and maybe not in the last several years, although I know that we've done some placements based on invoicing in the last few years. But these sort of CFO roles, chief marketing officer roles, CEO roles, I mean, they have done all of those placements for us in the last 10 years. So what we would look to is we would say we have a provider that is sort of nationally recognized among the firms that are nationally recognized, that we have a relationship with, that if our team tells us we've thought they've done good work, we could move more quickly. The idea that it's been 10 years since we've been out in the market and determined what's the best provider for us, that's absolutely correct. Like we wouldn't, nobody would fault us, I think, for saying, let's see what other options are out there.
But would they fault us for saying, you've used this firm for the last 10 years and we keep using them? Would they fault us for doing that?
Would who fault us? Just the
Whoever's
public
gonna
at
fault
large.
us.
I mean, but that's, again, assuming that there's been a public process to determine, with the caveat that it's old, so it's unusual to stick with one firm that long. But once you do a public process and you invite people to compete, and then you say, this is the one that's our best partner, then no one can fault you, and you actually can't do anything but use that person unless you do that process again.
So if we go back and say 10 years ago there was not an RFP, then we're obligated to do one now, even though we've used them for 10 years.
Right, likely, unless, and then the other thing that is is too soon to report to the committee, but the hospital participates in various cooperative purchasing arrangements. So it could be that we are part of a cooperative purchasing arrangement with AMN that's not strictly through the hospital, where there are providers available to us. So for example, the way that Insight Global, which is Metro's search firm, it is not through a direct RFP that Metro conducted. I think it's UC Davis in California conducted a process, and it was open to any municipality in the country to participate through that. It was part of the bid. So what we're exploring now too, in the event we need it, is whether the hospital is a part of that sort of, by proxy, we are contained within some other purchasing arrangement.
I'd be interested in knowing how long ago the RFP was done for the firm that the city uses. There may be some precedent there, and I don't know who is. It sounds like Mr. Esquivel that someone has raised the possibility since the last meeting that maybe we can't automatically use it. I don't know who that is, who's concerned about that.
Yeah,
So-
I think it's been as we've dug into this,
Yeah.
like, Mr. Smith, Metro Legal, has told me thus far, these are questions that need to be answered.
Yeah. Like, if we find out that Metro is using the same firm for 10 years without doing a new RFP, then I think we would be on safer ground, if they hadn't. The other thing about Dr. Elders, just to be clear, we have not asked her to do 2 jobs. She asked to do 2 jobs. There was no discussion, no, I'm going to keep being the chief nursing officer because I don't want that leadership to be disrupted. So just to clarify, she's doing what she wants to do.
Yeah, I commend her for it. I mean, I guess we're back to this question. This is really the question for this committee for this date, and it's, I guess, further thoughts on how we feel about doing our diligence, as we've said, the importance of that, versus going with the existing provider, subject to confirmation that we can go with the existing provider.
Well, here's my question. Can we say, oh, we know that there are 2 other groups that do this type of work? And if we can answer the question, yes, and we have some information about it, then it could be that this is still where we are, or this is what we need to do.
Yes.
I just want to feel comfortable that we know that there are none, or there are a few, or there is, this is the best one. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
To answer that question,
I think-
I'm not asking for an RFP. I'm just asking, do we know?
I'm gonna say something, and I'm gonna wait to see if Mr. Smith tells me that this goes too far out. That if individual committee members wanted to have somebody say to them individually, I don't think you're getting a good deal. You ought to consider going out. Here's the things that we do, why we're better than AMN. And that led you to say, we really should explore other options. That would be a basis to do it. I think what we cannot do, for example, is just select people. So say, here are a couple of firms that we think might be good alternatives. Will you send us proposals, and we'll look at those, but we're going to handpick you, and then we're going to compare you to AMN, and then we'll make our decision. Like, if we're going to go through the formal route, it has to be an open process. We have to publish a list of criteria as to what we're looking for, and we literally have to open it and advertise it to everybody and say, we are inviting, right? It is a request for proposal. We are asking the public to come in and give us your best deal. Like, that is the essence of public contracting.
Well, I do akin it to an individual's health. I mean, we have individualized health, so we have to look at our situation as individualized. So,
Has there been conversation by any, and maybe not the specific person or the specific hospital, but has there been conversation that anybody knows of where a conversation's been had about the search firm that we're considering and the effectiveness, or what other regional hospitals are using? Has anybody had that conversation? And I think that would be of great comfort to some of us who feels like, the only firm that we've actually looked at so far is the one that we're considering you know, and I guess, you know, the other thing I would say is, you know, from a shortening of timeline, there have been, I believe, some great candidates via the, you know, HAB board email system that have gone out for us to consider, that are proactively contacting us, right? Each of us individually, and we're sending to Janet for distribution. So it could shorten that timeline if, I mean, that doesn't mean we don't put it out there from a nationwide search perspective, but it seems like we would have a slate of pretty positive candidates at this point. So it's not like we're going out there and begging and pleading for people to come and submit their resume. So I'm just throwing that out there as well. I'm not looking for this to be drug out, but I guess my experience in corporate America has led me to, and working on other boards, is when you don't go kick tires after 5 and 10 years and you end up with the same people, even though it's easier and it takes time, effort, and energy, I always feel like it's the right thing to do. And I've seen situations in other boards that I've served on where people they've stayed with the entity and not questioned the fees, not questioned the service, not, you know, had a refresh on what's out in the community. And we all know that there's a lot that changed over the last 10 years. And it doesn't mean they're still not the best firm. I'm just saying, I think that I personally would like a little bit more comfort in saying they're the best firm rather than having them just come in, do the presentation, and we roll, because it's difficult and cumbersome. And and I get it. I don't want to lose candidates. I don't want to put more burden on Dr. Elders. I don't want to delay great decisions from the final CEO, but I also don't want to shirk our responsibilities and some of this by not considering the other options. So,
I mean, it seems to me that there's not much we can do today, that we need to get an opinion from Metro Legal on how AMN or Smith has been vetted, and then we come back on whether we do an RFP or not. So there's not much to really decide today. I don't think that I think the issue is kind of cloudy enough that we can't say, well, we'll do this firm if. I think we just need to find out if we need an RFP or not.
So in answer to your first question, I've had a personal conversation with a leader of one of our local healthcare firms who gave me a list of 4 firms who are excellent in healthcare recruiting. One of them was AMN. It was before I even knew that we were using AMN here. And I believe David had a similar experience, and I think those 3 things led to our pursuing AMN. I don't mean to suggest for a minute that we're going to limit our applicants to the people who have voluntarily contacted us. Absolutely, we need to do a national search and open it up. But and maybe, I mean, we haven't asked Mr. Smith to give his opinion here today. Maybe he can give us a recommendation. But after hearing all this great discussion, I still do feel some urgency to get moving on this. I think that the board has expressed that. We see some urgency, I think, from the council statement, and I just, in a lot of things in my life, when I find out it's time to do something, I like to move on it. And I feel like this hospital really needs, rejuvenation, and like Dr. Nazaru says, the employees are looking for change, the city council is looking for change, the mayor's looking for change, and we're in a great place with the leadership we have now. But we're also looking at restructuring, and I think a new CEO could want to come in and, if we, over the next 6 months, do a lot of restructuring, then we have a new CEO, they may want to do it again. So, I don't know. I lean toward, if it's legally allowable, to consider using AMN.
A thought that I have to try to balance or just meet in the middle all the concerns is maybe have those 4 firms and the one that Metro uses, have everyone bid and compare with AMN, because then that will save us time from the 9 to 10 months of an actual RFP process, but at least we threw it open.
Yeah, I agree that would be a good solution to sort of do a limited tire kicking. Mr. Smith can correct me. I don't think that we can do a sort of scaled down RFP. I think we either have to decide that we can use a vendor that we've selected through a process, or we have to create an RFP document, we have to publish it, we need to give people time to respond, and we can't limit it to 4 firms.
And it's my understanding that firm that Metro uses does not specialize in healthcare.
They would be welcome to bid on an RFP, but they would, yes. Mr. Smith, we've alluded to you several times. What's your view on the RFP process that would be required if we went that way?
It would be to follow the hospital's procurement standards, which would be advertisement called a solicitation for proposals open to the world, basically. But those proposals would be received and evaluated. The concern about looking at individual proposals in advance of that is that it could taint that process. So that's why I don't believe that's permitted if you do end up needing an open solicitation for an RFP. And to Dr. Martin's question, I don't yet have an opinion. David has adequately indicated what we're exploring to see what paths and options you do have as a recommendation. It's all it would be. And we'll share that when we gather more information.
So I think we are at a decision point. I think that after Dr. Miller's comment, there's probably actually 3 things. There is a punt option, which is we can reconvene in 2 weeks. We can spend that 2 weeks to determine whether AMN is an option from a procurement standpoint. It is true that then that would solve our question. If we determine that it's not possible, then we have to do an RFP. Maybe that is the wise way to do. The other way that I had envisioned, but maybe it's not the best way, though we could consider it, is, again, to keep things going, to conditionally make the decision that if AMN is an option, we would go with them. We wouldn't have to wait till at our next meeting. We could actually, if AMN is an option and this committee wanted to engage them, next meeting would be, let's have a preliminary meeting and talk about getting this getting the search process going. So I'll leave it to, if someone wants to make a motion and we'll just decide.
Option, or what's the third option?
I'm sorry.
Only 2?
The second option is bifurcated into 2 sub-options, which is we decide right now we want an RFP regardless of whether AMN. First option is decide right now, let's do an RFP. Second option is decide right now, let's engage AMN, subject to confirmation from Metro Legal that it's okay. Third option is let's wait and get Metro Legal to tell us whether it's okay, and then we'll decide, and then we can decide. Then the question will be presented, do we go with AMN because we can, or do we want to do an RFP for diligence sake?
Yeah, I think that the real timeline is we have to try to have something in place before the next full board meeting.
It's desirable. Yes. We don't have to.
No, but it would be desirable. And that would be the one thing that would slow it down, is if we don't have something to propose for the next
The
board
punting
meeting.
option would still allow us to do that, right? Because if we
Yeah,
meet in 2
right.
weeks
Yeah.
and we decide we're going to do an RFP, well, then we're just going to tell the board, we need you to authorize us to do an RFP process. And that's going to take time. If we want to engage AMN either now or we could do it at the next meeting, we would have time to develop a statement of work that the board would approve.
Do we have a quorum? Will we have a quorum for the next board meeting? I mean, for the next committee meeting. The reason I raise that is I'm probably not going to be able to be there. So,
Well, we only need 3, and we actually only need 2 members because I can fill in as the third
Okay.
member. I have a plan to be here in 2 weeks.
I think we'll have a quorum. Yes.
So, the term you use for a work understanding or what was
Statement
it?
of work.
Okay, statement of work. Will that be the definitive contract or will
Yes.
it? Okay.
Yeah, it would look like a contract.
So that I would echo Dr. Miller's hope that in the May meeting, we would have a contract to approve. You know, obviously only if we go with AMN, but you know, there were people on the board wanting us to, you know, have a called board meeting to do this even earlier, and we're not going to do that. But it would be great if we could have the contract in place and ready to go. I mean, one thing I guess is if we decided to do a conditional approval, you know, we might have AMN people here at the next meeting to talk about getting started.
That was the timeline I had in mind. If it's a will of the committee to do that, we would be prepared at the next meeting to actually start the search process.
With regard to the statement of work, to me, there's no reason to slow that process down because that's going to be applicable no matter who we would select. So I don't see that process should be slowed at all. You just plug and play in a name for the most part. Again, for me, I would personally rather do the punt option. I don't know that 2 weeks changes drastically what we're doing between now and still being able to prove that at the next board meeting. I would want to, I guess, feel that I had a little bit more time to process and ask questions in the community, quite frankly, which I would do. And I have some meetings coming up that would allow me to do that, to be able to also feel more comfortable with what other like hospitals are using as search firms. And again, just for me to get comfortable with it. I understand I can support the other. Again, I don't think they're a bad firm. I do believe that you guys have done the due diligence, but I feel like I don't see why in 2 weeks we don't make this, you know, assuming we can still come to the same conclusion and meet the May time frame.
Do we have a meeting also scheduled in 4 weeks?
Yes.
So that would be, I think,
Yes.
the day before the board meeting. So we meet in 2 weeks, then we meet in 4 weeks. And if we had made the decision to go ahead with AMN, then we could ask them to be present at the meeting in 4 weeks, and we could report. Well, let's see. Can we have them here before the board has approved our selection?
You mean as sort of a legal matter?
Well,
Anybody could appear before the
can
board.
we have
and talk to
AMN
us.
here saying, okay, we're ready to go, this is what we're doing first?
I don't know.
I believe, Derek, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe in dealing with some of this with our financial selections, you can have it as an agenda item for purposes of discussion and also information, i.e. approval based on the heading, which allows us to deliberate on each item, but we would not put their name on anyone's name specifically on the agenda. Is that correct, Derek? I mean, because the board didn't approve it.
The board's agenda? I mean, the board's agenda would come out before your So that's a timing issue to specify
Right.
that it's going to be. But there's nothing that prohibits you from inviting an official from AMN as a
talk to the
placeholder
board,
on your
sure.
agenda.
So in order to get the contract in the packet, we would have to make a decision 2 weeks from now, not 4 weeks.
I think I would like to make a decision 2 weeks from now. I will entertain if somebody wants to move. If the will of this group is we're going to do an RFP no matter what, then let's just do it now. If the will is that let's wait and see, because maybe we'll do an RFP or maybe we'll do AMN and a fair and option, I'm okay waiting 2 weeks. But in 2 weeks from now, we're going to decide one way or another.
That's what I'd recommend, that we wait and get an opinion from Metro on AMN's history, the process for procuring them 10 years ago or whenever, and then we'll decide. Fingers crossed that we'll have a lot of options.
I second.
Oh, so there's a motion to punt. I'll call it that. There's been a second.
Was that the motion?
No, that's beautiful. No, I like very well expressed, and you seconded immediately. So there's been a motion, a proper second, and there's time for discussion if there's further discussion. Hearing no other discussion, we'll vote on the motion to punt. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. We will reconvene with instructions and requests from Metro Legal to provide us at our next meeting with an update on the grounds for or the ability to use AMN through our previous procurement process.
One other thing we might put on the agenda in 2 weeks, because I think we can be working on it, on a list of stakeholders that we're going to hand to the search firm. And, you know, the Metro Council resolution has strongly suggested that, and I think we will all have different lists of stakeholders that should be interviewed so that the search firm can come up with the job description. And, you know, the sooner we get all that together, the sooner that the job can be posted.
And I agree with those comments. I would ask us to be thoughtful about not just a name, but maybe the category first of what we're looking for rather than a name, because I think people's name based on our own personal biases can push candidates forward for those positions. And I think if we look at a representative, let's say from this community or this specific sector of business or this specific geography of town, I think that is what we should start with first, rather than who Christy Smith knows and who Christy Smith might think is a great candidate. So I think that would be my hope, is that we be more thoughtful at kind of that top-down strategic approach of getting a wide variety of stakeholders, and then we can narrow it down so we can come up with names that would fit those categories.
Okay, so we will be sure, we'll add to the agenda. I'll ask Ms. Lester between now and the next meeting to poll the committee members and ex officio members as to generating that list by category or institution of stakeholders that we want to be part of this CEO search process and have input. And we will present that at our next meeting and have some comment and additions and discussion about that too, because that is clearly an important part to get things going. Okay, our next meeting is scheduled for May 14th, 11 a.m. Once again, thank you to the hospital cafeteria for the delicious food, and thank you for the committee members. Is there a motion to adjourn? Is there a second? All right, we stand adjourned. Can I use the gavel? Yes.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information on this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.